good to be back. Obviously, it's a city that I know very well. It's an environment I'm very comfortable in, but it's a different context. Before I was coming here as Kasarani as the home team coach most of the time. With a strong backing in my favor, but ultimately now we come as the away team, and look, playing away in Africa is always extremely difficult. We've had to do that more than most teams in recent years because we haven't had a home venue back in Banjul for a little while. Kenya experienced something similar for a couple of years. But yeah, we come here confident that we can put on a good performance, and that's the starting point. If we put on a good performance, then we have every chance to take a good result. But we also know, look, the Harambee Stars are going to give everything for the result. They've had a good period recently in Chan. It was a good game back in March between the two teams. So we're looking forward to the game, and we're going to be ready for it. No relation between me and the author that you mentioned. Yeah, look, for me, football, Musa mentioned in terms of the game itself, football's an interesting game that's, home or away, national team, club team. You don't necessarily get to write the story yourself. There's so many other things coming in. So, what happens in the future, nobody knows. If you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago, did I see myself as the head coach of the Gambia, as Uganda, as these different Gormahia, then you don't know what will happen in a decade's time. We only focus on winning today and performing today. And, as I hope the players would say, they see, full just drive from all of our staff with the Gambia to make sure we rise that flag as high as it can possibly go. And, yeah, you've mentioned there's family relatives, involved in football. Look, I think all of us who've been successful in sport, who've carved a career in this industry, we didn't do it on our own. Whether that was family, further relatives, whether it was friends, people pushing us, we all have to look outside our own self. They say no man is an island. We don't do it on our own. We all had help along the way, and we had inspiration along the way. So, I'm thankful for everything I've got, and hopefully we pass that forward to the next generation as well to help them come up. Thank you. I think football across the whole continent, you either get into a real positive cycle, or in some countries it's a negative cycle. The positive cycle we've got going on in the Gambia at the moment is that we have, very current role models for the next generation, like Musa Barrow, like Omar Colley, you mentioned Yankuba Minte. There's so many who, they're not distant role models. It's not like looking at someone in the Cameroon or in Ghana or in a different country for your African role models. It's people from within your community. And so a lot of these young boys, there's young boys who are maybe 19, 20 years of age, but they remember they were playing street football, when some of the guys qualified for the first African Cup of Nations, and they're from the same community. So they see it, and because they can touch it, because it's right beside them, they know it can be done. They know they can get to the Premier League. They know they can get to Serie A and the Bundesliga. So I think that's the first thing. There's very direct role models in the Gambia for the next generation. And then beyond that, because we've got over 200 players, almost 250 players playing professionally in Europe now. Because of that, there's a lot of investment. So that's the positive cycle we've got. Is a lot of European clubs, a lot of private entities are now, in the last 2-3 years, really starting to invest in facilities. So let's see. There's a lot more to be done. I think if you speak to anyone in the Gambia, they'll tell you that we've still only done 5% of the work in terms of infrastructure and football development. There's 95% still to go. But, if we're doing what we're doing now with 5%, imagine what we can do when we get to 50, 60, 70%. So we just all have to keep working, government, federation, coaches, players. We have to keep working to make sure we keep rising. So the result yesterday doesn't really have any effect on our game. For us, if you talk to anybody who works with me, we're always very internally focused. We've got to do our job, and if we do it often enough and well enough, then we'll achieve something medium to long term. So our objective is always the same. Can we go on firstly and put a performance in, and can that performance lead us to points? So it's exactly the same. In terms of players, look, every team has its own identity, its own character. Just because one player does very well for Team A does not mean he will succeed in Team B. You can see this all over the world. You know, there's players who've done fantastically well, you know, for huge clubs like, you know, Manchester United, Barcelona, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, and then they move to another big club and it doesn't quite work out for them because the system maybe isn't the same or the environment's different, their teammates are different. So that's the nature of the game. You know, it's the same. There's been players who have not done well in teams of mine who've done excellently well in other teams. So that's just the nature of the game. So, you know, I'm just pleased to see that some guys that we did work with, I think in the squad tomorrow, there'll be 4 or 5 guys that, you know, worked with me. I'm responsible for probably less than 1% of their progress. You know, 99.5% is down to their own effort and determination. But, you know, I'm just glad to have played even a small part in their journeys. I think I have an insight. Let me say that. I have an insight of the environment. Obviously, even just the logistics of this camp were a bit different than other camps because, and it's not just me, we've got staff members on the staff with the Gambia who are very well accustomed to the environment here in Kenya. So in the preparations, we were able to do things that maybe we can't normally do for away games. Because we have that connection with the city and the country. So I think that's helped. But look, going out here, we've got to win a football match. It's the same thing. You know, I've played against Kenya, I think, 4 times over the years. And again, that factors into the culture of football here. But I think, as I said earlier in the week, the Harambee Stars team is a different team than it was 2 or 3 years ago when I was coaching here regularly. There's a different character, there's a different feel to the team. And so we've got to be prepared for that. And if we are anything less than our absolute best tomorrow, then Harambee Stars, in front of what I'm sure will be 40, 50,000 people here at Kasarani, are more than capable of punishing us. So we've got to be at our best.